Hello and welcome to my channel Spirituality with V. I'm delighted today to introduce you to a very special person. This is Paul, and Paul does quantum healing, and I'd like Paul to tell you what that is and how that works. So Paul, I understand you do quantum touch. Would you like to tell us a little bit about what that is and how you got into it?
Yeah, of course. I think it began many years ago for me. I would say over 35 years ago. I started off actually with massage just as an interest. And I did something called shiatsu, which a lot of people know. It's a kind of massage, but working with the meridians of the body. And one of the things they did, which really fascinated me, was to um, become aware of energy in your hands and then to run them over someone's body without touching. And you can feel sort of, it's almost like magnetism. It's like when you put your hands together, you can feel there's something there.
Mm,
And I realized that if you could put one hand on someone's below their navel, rest it on the body, and then move the other hand across the rest of the body, you could feel where there were blockages.
mm.
And that was how I first got interested, and that was over 35 years ago.
And even just physical touch in itself is healing, isn't it?
Mm,
And I think you notice it more as well, as if you go through periods and sometimes years of actually not being touched at all, that when there's a feeling of being touched, it's such a beautiful, warm feeling, and you know that because it's not normal. Whereas if you hug and touch all the time, you wouldn't necessarily know how lovely that feels and how healing it is.
And I think it's a lot to do with trust too, because
Mm,
if you really trust someone and you feel open to them, and you're vulnerable in some sense, and that person, whether it's your mum or close friend or whatever, and they give you a hug and they say, well, look, they don't have to say anything. You feel that connection. It's almost like you're sharing something with them, and that that can then somehow heal you.
mm,
So yeah, touch really important.
yeah.
And anyway, from that point on, I put that on the back burner for a while because I started to learn meditation, which is where I met you actually.
Yeah.
Um, and that was for me began about 30 years ago, and I met you subsequently. Um, and it was almost like to use your mind and to focus on um, kind of bringing divine
Light.
qualities and
Mm,
light into action and into thoughts and words and everything became a kind of the primary thing. And I put the kind of healing idea with touch and bodies and things to the side because it was almost like, well, that's all distraction. That's what I was told.
mm,
But I realized I had to come back to it eventually.
mm.
So the meditation was really useful because it was good for me to learn about silencing my mind because in that silence we can then you could say hold space not just for the self but even for others because I realize we're all interconnected.
Yes, and can I just
Mm.
explain? Because my channel is mainly about meditation.
Hmm.
So for the viewers, I'm just going to say about holding space. There's a huge difference between learning to meditate and sitting down and actually giving yourself that time to allow the thoughts to clear, to allow them to settle, so that there is enough space. And it is something that it's a journey that you have to go through. It's not automatic. And so when you've been meditating for a while, it's easier to have that space. And then I think when you hold space, it's actually then being able to hold that for others as well. Would you say
Mm.
that that's accurate?
Definitely, and I think it was very organic for me. It was almost like maybe that wasn't obvious at the beginning. So I did anyway all this meditation for about 20 odd years. And then after 20 years, I sort of found I got to a point where it was almost there was an ideology involved. and ideologies always have limits.
Mm,
And so it was almost I climbed into this big box that was much bigger than the box I was in, and therefore I felt free. But as I grew, I hit the sides of this bigger box. Then I realized, oh my God, I need to get out of this.
mm,
And so you smash your way out, really. And I realized, okay, I need to think in a very unlimited way. And
mm,
I got back into healing then. And I learnt pranic healing, bioenergy healing, which I went to Slovenia to learn.
mm,
And also, I looked at the Oriental forms of healing, like with Chinese, which is very much like the Eastern European bioenergy healing. So you got the Indian, which is the pranic healing. And then finally, I got onto quantum touch, which is it's an American guy who started it, but it's really an ancient system that is used throughout the world, which is mainly using breath work.
mm.
So it's like tuning in and breathing because breath somehow is very much connected with life
Oh,
force.
absolutely, yes.
And if you call the ambulance and you tell them you can't breathe or your heart problems all in this area,
Mm,
they'll just come very quickly
yes.
if they think it's serious. So breath and the heart is this area, this chakra and this area.
Mm.
So
Now, it's interesting you should say that actually, because I had that thought this morning. I wondered how many people actually ever feel grateful for the breath, because if you think for a minute, what would I do without my breath? So if you just try to hold your breath and stop your breath for a minute, um, you'd be gasping, and it's the one thing we can't live without, isn't it? If the breath stops, that's it. We would leave the body. But I don't think that we ever stop and think enough about the value of that breath and what it's actually doing. Our whole human existence is based, isn't it, on the breath? And then from there, I think it, as you just was explaining, that it's even more important in terms of when you breathe more and you become conscious of the breath, that the energy value that it holds.
yes, very true. So I started experimenting with this obviously when I got onto quantum touch. I got very interested and I decided to become a practitioner and then an instructor. So I did all the training for that. And so I'm still a trained instructor and I have instructed people on how to learn how to use it. And so it's been very useful and I have now linked it with the meditation. And so it's become far more powerful because it's not just like working with someone and looking at their body, because quantum touch is actually originally about touching, putting hands-on healing. But then quantum touch has another element to it, which is using your mind.
Excuse the aeroplane going by.
Yeah, we'll just have a meditation now while that aeroplane goes past. So
Natural break, yep.
it's always good to have a bit of silence between. So thank you, aeroplane.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, so that's how it kind of then brought everything together because it brought together the breath work and the healing work and somehow became much more powerful.
I'd like to share actually, as an observer of that journey, that it went from, um, a nice, maybe normal level to literally quantum level. Your healing ability just was skyrocketing. It was just not anything that I'd been used to, you having done before. Um, and some things you healed in seconds, pains and things like that. So, um, having personally experienced it, I can highly recommend it as well.
Mm, thank you. Yeah, it's and that I relate to that a lot. I mean, the the next step for me was I got to a point where the breath work was being used, a lot of things were happening, it was all working well, but then I felt that within me there were aspects of myself, I would say, which were interfering with a kind of more unlimited way of working, and that's when I had to I felt the pull to travel to South America and work with plant medicines and shamans and to clear um, what was in the way.
Mm, mm,
And of course, that I've been to Peru 3 times, and a lot of stuff cleared. Also, a good friend of mine who was a client, who's in her 80s now, she introduced me to the idea of working with guides, which I wasn't really um, familiar
familiar
with.
with. Mm,
And of course, I sort of almost rejected it initially because I
mm,
thought, oh, this, she doesn't know what she's talking about. But then she said to me, she said, well, I knew that she had a connection to something. And so I listened to her, I gave her the benefit of the doubt, and she said, well, just talk to the guides. You might not hear them
mm,
communicate with you, but just talk to them.
mm,
And so I didn't know what they were, but I just would talk to them. And I've now come to the conclusion that each one of us has a higher self, and that higher self is the guide that guides me, and you have a higher self that guides you. And these higher selves are all part of the divine source, and the guides represent the higher self of all beings.
mm,
And so you can actually speak and address all these higher selves. And you say, I'm speaking to all the guides. That means the higher self of every being, even animals, ants, trees, whatever. All life forms
mm,
have a higher self. And then we ask that those guides to assist us. So, for example, your guide knows what you need to heal. And so if I say, if I'm working with you, I would say speak to your guide and say I'm prepared to surrender whatever's in the way of this healing that I'm asking for.
mm,
And then the guide will show me what this energy is
mm.
which you have asked to clear.
Yeah.
So the guide won't do it without your permission.
Mm,
So I can't do anything for you without you being in control,
yeah.
in a sense. And then you give permission to your guide, and then the guide shows me, and then I clear that energy, and then all of a sudden you feel it's gone.
Yes.
And quite often I feel that you could help me in some way, because I could have a blind spot.
Mm,
So I could be working with lots of people, but I could be blind to something in myself, which maybe I'm not ready to look at or something. But I'd say, well, Vina, look, um, I don't know what this is. It's a blind spot, and I'm whatever this blind spot is, I'm prepared to let it go. But I don't know how to, so I'm going to speak to my guide and say, look, please help me. And Vina's going to work with you to help me,
mm,
and then you can help me.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a very beautiful thing, isn't it? Because I think the expression "no man is an island" is a far more bigger concept, a more important concept than we sometimes like to give credit for. Um, and that just shows how we do actually need each other and how we work better when we're in harmony and we're in cooperation with each other as well. So that's a wonderful aspect of healing that people can work together and help each other. It
Mm.
doesn't all have to be one way, as is the traditional thinking about healing, is that you go to a healer and that's it. The healer is going to maybe heal you over one session, over a few sessions, and then you may go back for other things later. But the idea of a healing happening both ways is a very beautiful idea and a very beautiful practice, actually. We're just recording now, thank you. Um, Another thing that I did want to ask is for many of us, we've had to kind of come out of being who we were. So we had the same label and identity as other people, as children, and in growing up. And we've had to conform a lot. We've had to spend a lot of our life conforming. I've been asking, what was it that gives permission? How do you break out of that mold so that, you're taking a risk? You know other people are going to say, he's strange, she's strange, they're weird, those kinds of things. What was it for you that gave you permission to break out of that and follow your heart to be who you are?
I think I'm still breaking out somehow because I feel that it's almost like the self, which is what we operate with here in this dimension here in this reality. It's very much a programmed experience. So, we have habits and thought patterns and everything, and limits until we kind of break beyond those limits. We don't even know there's something there.
Mm,
And so I think we're constantly breaking free.
mm,
And there's always going to be a challenge that comes from the external or internally even that challenges those limits. And and then the I suppose the opportunity is there then to say, well, I'm going to accept this as an opportunity now to 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 trust that there's a bigger part of me that is can see beyond somebody judging me,
mm,
thinking I'm weird or whatever.
yeah.
And so the main thing is not to disturb the external too much. And so it's a little dance of navigating these things.
Mm,
Sometimes, you can confront somebody, which is fine, but you can confront them in you could say quite a respectful way,
mm,
or
mm,
you can confront them in an aggressive way. So if someone sort of thinks you're weird, you could you could get angry with them.
mm,
Or you could say, well, okay, they think I'm weird, and so I'll play a role. And so it's playing the role as much as possible of appearing to be, normal, but
yeah.
undercover, on a very subtle level, you are working with guides.
Mm,
And so sometimes I think what happens is the right people come to you because you're tuning into this sort of purer energy,
mm,
and then the whole external world changes.
yes.
And I think if you look at someone like Eckhart Tolle, for example, he will attract people who are interested in what
Yes. Yeah.
he's talking about and his energy. And I think he's got to that point. I'm sure, I mean, I've listened to him talk about his past where people thought he was a weirdo,
Yes.
thought he was actually some kind of, psycho.
Mm,
And he had to just kind of accept that.
mm,
And as soon as he accepted it, the person who was thinking that changed
right.
and said, actually, no, I think you're okay.
Yeah.
So I think it's almost like we can transform that.
Mm. Isn't it interesting because as far as Eckhart is concerned, um, I've always, right from the very first book that he brought out, was it The Power of Now, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
I think so.
Um, that he's had incredible insight and intelligence beyond normal people. That's how I've always perceived him. So I can't imagine people thinking that he might be a little bit strange because actually my perception has been that he's super intelligent. So it's interesting, isn't it, how we judge each other. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, he was a very good teacher for me in a way, listening to him, and I listened to his book on audio
Mm,
10 times, and each time I listened, it sort of almost scraped a layer off,
mm,
and I could feel almost the abrasion. It was my resistance to what he was saying or whatever. It was like sandpaper.
mm,
And it took my preconceptions. And
Mm,
I think this is the self as well. The self is like some sort of a container
mm,
with all these programs in and beliefs and ideas and opinions and so on. And so the world is there to challenge, or the external comes to challenge those beliefs and ideas. And if I'm in the right space, I can almost um, exit that kind of box of
mm.
ideas
I like the way
in,
you've put that. Yeah.
into a kind of limitless space, which where anything's possible.
Mm,
And that's when healing becomes really interesting. It becomes very creative
mm,
because you're kind of saying, well, help me to see this in a particular way. Okay, you're working with someone, you're trying to resolve it, and you know, you say, okay, show me. You say to the guide, show me what I need to see
mm,
in order to help you to help this other soul. And you might get images come to you,
mm,
and you can ask and say, what does this image mean? And the guide will sort of show you why they're showing you this image.
mm,
And then, oh, I get it. Okay. And it's like, oh, so see as water running down a mountain and it's eroding the mountain away.
mm,
And you say, if you have more water, the mountain will get eroded quicker.
mm,
And so then you say, oh, what if it's like a waterfall and it's really pounding down? And then you sort of create that. And I use breath, I use all sorts of things, and I go with it. So it's like somebody's telling me a method, a story, and showing me pictures and saying, this is how it can change. And I work with that and I work with the guide.
mm,
And somehow the guide's saying, well, you know, I can't do it. She is releasing,
mm,
but you need to kind of um, see this in a particular way that even your limitations, you go beyond your own limitations.
mm,
Because you could look at this energy and have some limited thing. I'm telling you to forget all that and just listen to what I'm telling you or showing you
mm,
and then work with that. So it's really trusting that you're going to get something that you don't know, that you're not familiar with,
mm.
and you have to just go with it.
Yeah. Um, I think, I don't know what your experience is, but do you get a number of people that will come to you that just expect you to almost wave a magic wand and they're healed? So when they come, they're not expecting to participate or to be part of the healing process. They just want, I mean, say for example, they've come with a neck pain. Um, and they really just want Paul to take away the neck pain, not recognizing that they can participate in their own healing by understanding where the neck pain came from, why it's persisted for so long. Do you get people still asking you to wave the magic wand just to take away their illnesses?
I feel that, I mean, for me personally, I don't really get that. Most people won't actually ask me. Um, I think people are still in a certain mindset that, you get what you pay for,
Mm,
and they tend to go for things which are more mechanical. It's like go for a massage or physiotherapy or chiropractor, or say if they got a back problem, they'll go to one of these kind of people who do manipulation or
mm,
whatever, and they see it very much as something physical. Whereas for me, that physical stuff is good,
mm,
but for me, I often, I will try, I'll say to that person, it's all about positioning it too, because everyone's got their own belief system,
mm.
and you've got to sort of break through that belief system in order for them to be
Be
open
open to,
to whatever you're kind of alluding to.
yes.
So, for example, there was a guy who he had his own garage. He was like a mechanic and very kind of like um, earthy and really, what I would have if I told him what I do, he would just thought he's nuts.
Mm.
But I said to him, I said, okay, look, you've got back pain. And he said, oh, I've been to the doctors and this and that. And they said, nothing wrong with me.
Mm.
So I said, well, okay. I said, back pain is usually associated with money problems. Do you worry about money? He said, yeah, I do. So he had a lot of money, but he
Mm.
was always worried about money,
Of
like
course, yeah.
spending it.
Yeah.
But he was always worried about where it's going to come from. But he had a lot of
Mm.
money, but
Mm.
he's still worried.
Yeah.
So
I
I
think
said,
it's probably true to say the more money you have, the more you worry about it.
yeah. So I said to him, I said, okay, right. So when I said that, it was almost, he thought, how does he know? Well, I didn't know. I was just saying, I was just asking him.
Mm.
So anyway, I said, okay, look, let's do a little experiment now. This is how I work with people. I said, it's like play.
Hmm.
It's like make them into children again. I said, okay, we'll play a little game now. So I said, okay, look, focus on that pain now. Forget everything else. Just focus on that back pain. And I said, tell me how much that pain is. How much does it hurt? Is it 10 out of 10 is really painful and 0 is nothing? Where is it? Is it like a 4 or a 5? And he sort of like tuned in. So then what you're getting someone to do is to start looking and feeling, which they don't normally do. It's just
No.
they're trying to make it go away.
Yeah.
I said, don't try and make it go away. Really focus on it and forget everything else. Don't try and go to everything else and forget that,
Mm.
because that's the thing that's calling for your attention.
Yes.
So he focused on it and he said, I think he said it was like a 4 or something. Because a lot of these people take painkillers and
Yes.
the pain never goes.
Mm.
So they said, well, I've taken all these painkillers, but it's still there on
Mm.
some level.
Mm.
So I said, okay, focus on that 4. And then I said to his guide, I said, okay, look, he does want to get rid of this. And he's focusing on it so that you can see it, so the guide can see it. So you're telling, by feeling the pain, you're telling the guide, this is the thing that I want to be cleared.
Yes.
Yeah. And so I felt something that guide showed me and I cleared it.
Mm.
And it goes in stages. So you clear one and then there's another layer, and it goes in like an onion.
Yes.
So I said that, and then he said, I said, okay, so that when I first cleared, I said, has it changed? He said, yeah, it's gone down. It's gone down to say a 3.5 from 4.
Mm.
So I said, okay, now focus on that 3.5. And so then you see another thing which is smaller,
Mm.
and then that goes away. And then I said, what do you feel now? And he said, oh, it's gone to like a 3 or
Mm.
2.5. And bit by bit it went down. And then he looked at me afterwards, and it was real puzzle. He was really puzzled because it's like, this can't be real because I've never read about this. Nobody's told me about this. Doctors don't know about this. The TV doesn't tell me about this. Not on the BBC News. So I can't quite understand what just happened.
Mm. Wow.
But I think what happens is that person then, they could have cognitive dissonance
Yes.
and say, "Oh, that never happened," and I'll just blank that out of my mind. Because if that is real, what just happened, it means I need to question my whole life, and I don't want to do that because that's going to be too much of a headache for me.
Mm.
So I'll pretend it never happened. Or they will store it and say, that was interesting, and, you know, maybe there's more to life than I know.
Mm.
And so it depends on the person, really.
Yeah.
And I know some people completely block it
Mm.
because their belief system is so strong that the idea of believing anything outside of it is a threat
Mm.
to their identity, because it's saying, well, I don't know. What he or she is suggesting is so alien to me
Mm.
that, uh, you know, it's not logical.
Yeah, and it doesn't fit in with their reality.
Yeah, and
Mm.
it would completely, like, I'd have to completely reevaluate the way I look at the whole world and my life,
Yeah.
and therefore I'm going to just blank it off and say it's nonsense, or it, it's not, doesn't work.
Mm.
Yeah,
Mm.
and I've met people like that, and you can't help those people.
Mm.
So they will kind of open up to you to a certain degree. So some people will heal instantly,
Mm.
you know, they will surrender and their guide will work with them, and it's like the guides, they're allowing the guide to show me what to take away, and it's almost they're not holding it anymore.
Mm.
They've kind of said, okay, I let go and let the guide take it.
Yeah.
And then the guide will show me and it will go.
Yeah. And would
Uh,
you say that's probably more true of people who are already doing meditation and who are already open and a little bit
yeah, and
aware of?
yeah, it could be, but also you do get people who are, you know, not complex. Some people they want to be really intelligent and clever, and they're so clever that actually, but the cleverness is inside a box,
Yeah, it
and
works
everything,
against them in some
yeah,
ways.
everything outside that box. Um, there's there's so much outside that box, but they're happy to be in there because it's that gives them a sense of power.
And it's very worldly, isn't it? To be very clever or intellectual gives them worldly acknowledgement and power, and it's safe. You know, everybody
Safe.
understands that. That's what we're all here doing in this
Yeah, and it's like
3D reality.
yes, and it's like almost like a weapon as well.
Yes.
Because if you have credentials which are kind of widely kind of acknowledged and accreditation and stuff which is worldly, like you know I'm a doctor or I'm a lawyer and I've got all these degrees, you can kind of show them to people and people bow down to that
Yeah.
because it's part of the world system.
Mm.
If you have something that is, this is why witches were hunted down in the past because they knew things that threatened the, the status quo.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, you know, someone who's a lawyer, he's not interested in two people coming to some kind of, you know, understanding with each other and settling the matter because then he'll be out of a job.
Mm.
So he wants two people, they'll want two people to be fighting so that they can get in there and make some money, you know?
Yes.
And because that's the system they live in.
Mm.
Whereas healing is all about actually working outside of the system, really. And it's something so natural and powerful that used to be mainstream, I believe, in at one time on this planet,
Mm.
thousands of years ago, in certain groups of people. Even today, you've got indigenous people in, you know, Australia, South America, different Africa probably, and within those tribes, this tradition has come down from thousands of years ago,
Mm.
and they're brought up to trust in the guidance of nature.
Mm.
And I know that people who do dieting, for example, in Peru, South America, they eat a very bland diet, and they stay in seclusion, like in a little hut. They don't read books or talk to anyone, or there's no music, nothing. They
Mm.
just listen to nature, and they're in their own silence, and they eat these plants, which are, for example, like cabbage juice or something. They don't have anything else, and they just keep on this diet for 2 weeks. And what happens is all these toxins and everything in the body
Mm.
start to clear out from your brain.
Mm.
All the things, sugars, the addiction to salt, sugar,
Mm.
all these things, caffeine. You kind of go through some sort of purging. The
Mm.
withdrawal goes out. And then all of a sudden, your mind becomes very silent because you're not getting that noise from your body, your
Mm.
brain, chemicals and things which are artificial,
Mm.
and you're just listening to nature sounds
Mm.
which have been here from thousands and thousands of years. So everyone who's ever lived in that jungle has heard those birds that sing the same song,
Mm.
and they all sing it exactly the same,
Beautiful.
and animals and everything, and the way trees, leaves move, and
Mm.
the way water sounds, and that's the same, been for thousands of years. So then what happens is your mind becomes so silent that they start to hear the spirits of the plants speaking to them, and they can actually communicate with these spirits. So they're like guides, or the spirits are like guides. So it's the every plant has a spirit,
Mm.
and the spirit knows what the plant as a form can do, because the spirit, you could say the plant is a chemist
Mm.
that manufactures a certain kind of leaf or buds or whatever, which has certain chemicals in it. And animals instinctively know what leaves to eat, or so on. And so if you have an ailment, like in South America, the way the medicine women and medicine men work, the shamans or whatever you want to call them, they would go and do this kind of cleanse. They would go into seclusion, just eat a very basic diet and be in nature and clear their minds. And when they would come back, they would hear the spirits of the plant speaking. So
Mm.
if you came to then one of these medicine ladies or medicine men and said, I have I've had this ache in my arm for 3 months or whatever, they would, their mind is just connected to all these spirits, and they say, all these spirits out there of every plant that exists in this jungle, you can see what Vina is asking. Can you tell me what she needs to eat
Mm.
for this pain to go away? And they'll tell. They'll
Yeah.
say, okay, go and find this plant. It looks like this. Come over here. They'll tell you where to go. They'll walk them through
Walk you
the
through.
jungle.
Mm.
They say, go left here, go there. Now, here, that tree there. Yeah, that one. Yeah, cut that thing off. Make a tea for her,
Mm.
and make sure she drinks this every day for 3 weeks or something. And so you go and do that, and what happens is the pain goes away, or the cancer goes away, or whatever goes away.
Yeah.
And so it's like understanding that nature, in a way, plants are there to serve animals and humans,
Mm.
and they are medicine. They make medicine. Food is medicine. So you eat the right things, your digestive system is healthy. And of course, in the modern world, we've done the opposite.
Mm.
It's sort of
We've
anti-life.
abused everything, haven't we?
Yeah, I mean,
Really,
this
too
world is
much.
the systems of the world are anti-life. You go to into agriculture, they put chemicals and fertilizers and everything, and kill it. Basically, everything living in the earth dies off
Mm.
because of all these chemicals, and so you're growing something by killing.
Mm.
Yeah, whereas the permaculture, which is a more ancient way, is to not use any chemicals, to just, like, if you're growing crops, you pull out the weeds and whatever, and you put compost onto the earth, and that feeds the earth, and all the worms and all
So
the micro.
honouring the cycles of
Yeah, you don't
growing
dig up
things.
the earth,
Mm.
you don't plough it, you just dig a hole and put your
Mm.
seedling in, and you don't disturb it, because people think, oh, you rake the earth and all that. I used to think that that's what you do, because I got conditioned.
Mm.
But actually, you don't do that. You don't disturb the earth, because it's so alive.
Mm.
As soon as you dig it, you disrupt all the systems that are
Mm.
operating in there.
Yeah.
And so it's like if a big bulldozer came and ripped through London, all the people would get killed and their houses would fall down. The earth underneath the surface of the soil is like that. There are all
Mm.
these things living there. It's like in little colonies and
Yeah.
everything. You leave them alone, and then it just keeps growing and growing, giving you more and more food.
Mm.
And that's the way to grow. And healing is really about that. It's bringing that back, that way of being open and trusting,
Mm.
and and to work with each other. Because in a sense, people can have a big ego and say, well, oh, I don't want a healer because that means I can't heal myself, and that means I'm lame or whatever. but actually it's understanding that we are all kind of creations from one source,
Mm.
and that consciousness that created you created me, and we're working with the same consciousness. So you are only you because of consciousness, and I'm only me because of consciousness.
Mm.
And therefore, when I understand that the same consciousness that um, is giving me life is giving you life, I can't have an ego about that,
Mm.
because then it's like saying, well, I am consciousness, but flowing through Paul,
Mm.
and you are consciousness flowing through Vina.
Mm.
So we are both consciousness. So we are actually both one thing.
Yes, just that that one's called Paul and this one's called Vina.
That's right. And then once I see
And
that,
that
I
one's a
realize,
male and this one's a female.
so if I'm consciousness, that means I am on one level, I'm also flowing through
Yeah,
you,
yeah.
and I'm flowing through this.
Mm.
But if I identify with this rather than consciousness, then I'm going to have ego.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
And I say, oh, I don't want Vina to help me. I don't like Vina, or whatever. And that's
It
like
does really.
the entity is making a kind of a comparison based on insecurity, fear, and all kinds of crazy ideas. Yeah.
I'm always separating.
Yeah.
Mm.
And once, if you look at bees, for example, I mean, I believe that um, we are moving to a time, another kind of a shift in the paradigm is taking place now slowly,
Mm.
where we are going to move to a time where humans, in the next paradigm, will be like bees in the sense that we'll have nothing to hide.
Mm.
Bees have a hive mind.
Mm.
They know what's going on in the hive, and they all have a role to play, but they're all playing a role to make the hive prosper.
Mm.
And so it's not like I'm going to have my own agenda.
Yeah.
It's
I
like,
want
if,
to be queen.
yeah, I want to be queen. It's like the queen is as much part of the hive as one of the worker bees.
Yeah, because she couldn't do anything without them, could she? So.
No, and the worker bee says, well, I want my queen to thrive.
Mm.
And even if I have to die protecting the hive, I don't mind, because the hive is more important than this idea of self.
Mm.
So it's a kind of selfless state of being.
Mm.
Because when that bee dies, anyway, it goes back into consciousness.
Mm.
It goes back into the pool of consciousness,
Mm.
and it never dies.
No.
Actually, it's only the entity that ceases to
Yeah.
exist in this plane.
Yeah.
And once people see that, there's a fearlessness.
Mm.
Like death is just an illusion.
Mm.
You know, it's like people want to hang on to this because it's so familiar,
Yeah.
but that's the only reason.
Yeah. Well, all of our memories are attached in this life as well. And I think that's part of the journey, isn't it? Isn't it to discover as much as you can and move towards that consciousness and understand that. But okay, let's change the direction a little bit here. Um, is there one piece of advice, if you had to give our audience one piece of advice to help them along a healing journey, what would you suggest? What would be the first thing or the one major thing or maybe an important thing that they could focus on right now to move forward in their healing journey?
Okay, so everyone's at a different stage. Some people are quite advanced, and some people are just embarking on it. My sense is that we are all one, and so whether you're just learning or you kind of quite ahead on some level, um, it's like all the people who are supposedly beginning the journey, they will accelerate very quickly if they want to, because the speed at which time is moving now is very fast. It's like a conveyor belt that's going at high speed. And most people, like in the airport, you can take the conveyor belt when you're going down, or you can walk on the normal ground.
Mm,
And most people are still walking the normal ground. But if they want to step onto that um, conveyor belt,
yeah,
they'll go
definitely.
much quicker.
Yes.
And so they will catch up with everyone else very fast, if that's their wish. And I've seen this happen with people. who will just, they will shoot almost straight past me.
Mm.
I mean, I've been on this journey for 30 years, but there are people who will go very quickly.
Mm.
And it's all about the timing for them, um, and to just have faith, really, at this point in time, because faith is trusting that there is a way to free myself
Mm.
that um, I'm not aware of yet.
Mm.
But it's almost like it exists right in front of me, but I can't see it.
Mm.
And if I say, well, what will it take for me to be able to see how I can just really really move forward very quickly and just put that kind of request out to your guides and so on, all the guides.
So
And
you're saying even if people may not have the belief that they have guides, that they should actually begin just having that conversation as though they were there anyway.
that's right, because I think that is the step, which is that's the kind, it's almost like a leap of faith.
Mm.
It's like you're saying, well, I don't know because I can't see it and I can't feel it, but I have to trust that
Mm.
it's there.
Mm.
And quite often that comes when someone meets, like, say, some spiritual teacher, like the Dalai Lama or whoever,
Mm.
and they actually go with this idea, oh, wow, the Dalai Lama, he knows everything, he's connected to the divine. Whatever he says, I will trust and believe. And so if he says something, that person will open up to something new.
Mm.
But if you said it, maybe they might not, because they'll say, well, Vina's my friend, what does she know? Well, she's my sister, especially your family, because they see you as very limited.
And they remember you how you've always been, so they don't like to see you change because.
Exactly, and it's like, why would Vina know anything more than I know, or so on? And I think it's like trusting that, well, anyone or anything, an animal can come and show you something.
Mm.
Like, someone said, I read a story once about someone who lost someone close to them died, and they were really upset, and they went to the cemetery, alone, just and sat at their grave and started talking to them,
Mm.
like their spirit or whatever, and said, can you give me a sign that you're okay?
Mm.
And as they were sitting there, a butterfly came and landed on their hand.
Oh,
And they said they saw the butterfly and somehow they knew that was a
that that
sign.
was the sign. Yeah.
Yeah, so you can ask, and eventually, if you trust and you say, well, I don't know, but I'm giving my kind of my kind of, it's almost like I'm giving part of myself that doesn't believe to you
Mm.
so that I can believe
Mm.
or I can experience it. So it's a kind of surrender. It's giving part of you away,
Yeah.
the you that doesn't believe, or that can't, feels you can't believe. You're saying, well, that part of me that feels it can't or doesn't want to, can I give that to you so that I can? And I think that's the way, really, for
Yeah.
people.
Great. Thank you very much for that, Paul. And finally, if our viewers wanted to contact you, how would they do that?
Well, they can contact me by email or on my website. So if you go to learntoheal.co.uk, so
Learntoheal.co.uk,
www.learntoheal.co.uk,
and I'll
that's my
put that in
website.
the description as well.
Okay.
And I'm sure all of you will agree with me. That's been absolutely wonderful. What amazing information. Thank you very much for doing this. And
It's a pleasure, and we can do more another time if you like. It
fantastic. Okay.
depends on what people want.
Yes, of course.
We're here for you.
Thank you. And I must apologise. This is London, and these are London noises. So sorry about the sounds of aeroplanes and fire engines and police cars in the background, but that's normal London daily life. So see you next time. Thank you very much for joining us. Bye
Thank
for now.
you.
Bye bye.